Hello, everyone, and welcome to This Week in Hospitality Marketing live show number 564. I am your host, Lauren Gray. Thank you so much for joining us. This is actually be a first part in a multi-part conversation. This one is to first introduce the idea of what we are going to talk about in greater depth. And it's also just to begin to wrap your head around the concept that we are watching behavioral change in not just our industry, in all industries and all methodologies of using technology as to how people are finding us, deciding on us, and then interacting with us. To step back a little bit, I'm going to use some terms called ZMOT, Zero Moment of Truth or Transaction. It's a Google adopted term from decades ago to try to describe the funnel function at that moment when a person goes from all the things they're doing on the internet to the moment of the decision, where this is it, this is what I want, I'm going to act. And our marketing related to that. Then we're going to talk about long language models, LLMs, and I'm also going to talk about agentics, driven discoveries using AI models. Those would be the parts of the biggest context of what we're going to talk about. So first, let's talk about our topic and know that this is the first in an evolution of conversations that will be related to this transitional thinking of behavioral changes that are happening in our industry for marketing. So have we finally migrated from ZMOT to intent marketing? Now, as I mentioned, ZMOT is zero moment of truth or transaction. And this was Google's early identification process of that funnel program that we have been so endearingly connected to for so long. The process of the discovery, the education, and the conversion. Simple 3 steps, but there's more to it, but those are the larger 3 steps. And that conversion is the ZMOT moment. We as marketers have hovered densely around this ZMOT to be there when it happens. Or as if you watched Hamilton, in the room where it happens. Sorry. The idea is that it's affordable for us because at that moment, the user's engagement with how they've discovered this moment where they're making the choice is now culled away all of the variables to the moment that they're down to the point where they're seeing what it is that they want to buy. So if we can advertise in the closeness of that at that moment, whether it's rate driven, amenities driven, any of the variables that are unknown to us as the user experience goes, but if we can be around that point, then it's cheaper for us, although much more competitive, so it has its own expense, but cheaper in comparison to volume. So we can get that final conversion if we just step into the right time. Case in example, I booked a room at a hotel, I'm flying in, I'm going in, but on the day that I've arrived, even hours before I go to check in, I'll check around real quickly at other hotels and see if there's anything better for whatever reason. Maybe I'm not as tethered to the hotel. It was an option choice for whatever I picked, but maybe I'm seeing if there's anything better. Other hotels that I would have liked, but for reasons didn't choose from, and I see something better, and immediately I've changed my transaction. That being in the space at that time, that advertisement that got me in front of that guest to be looking for those changes in their plans is a concept of what ZMOT is all about. So ZMOT's a framework basically on 4-step principles. There's a stimulus, which is awareness. There's research, which we refer to as education in the funnel. There's an evaluation, which is the pro and con functionality, the dissemination of what they've learned. And then there's the moment of transaction, the booking, the ZMOT. Okay. Historically, and what we're all familiar with doing over and over for so long, is a guest would be seen added for inspiration high up in there in the discovery phase. And this is where we left our OTAs and brands to spend the money necessary to be in this space. Because from an ROI perspective, being in that high discovery space of the funnel that we visualize so much, it costs a lot because you spend a lot of money for people to see you that don't really end up doing anything with you. And we've tried to call that down in discussions over the years as to how valuable that still can be and how does that get translated in other channels and how people migrate through other discoveries to begin to solidify their choosing based on research of what they want to be more considerate in your hotel or whatever. But again, just from the simple step-by-step functionality of what we're talking about, stimulus, research, evaluation, and booking, people get into this discovery phase. And like I said, the way that we're still seeing it, but it's changing, and the way that it has been historically that we do to marketing is they see an ad, They get inspired. They go to several websites. They search over variations of things. They may check multiple hotel sites. They may check OTAs for listings. They may read reviews to consider what they can between the variable options of it. They have a look at the rates. And eventually, through this entire process, that they used to go from 10 to 100 websites. Remember statistics not too long ago that the average number of websites that a traveler will go to before booking is 47, 32, 28. And it kept going down because better content on websites were happening. So this was the process that people did. Now, for us, from a forecasting perspective, okay, this gave us a trail, our ability to look at the engagements based on all of this process that the guest was going through. Search volume, the keywords, the traffic to a website, all of those things. The number of sessions that came to our site or other sites that we were monitoring. Whether a site referred to us, whether an OTA directed them as a booking directly after booking through them. You had look-back windows. You had seasonality shifts in demand cycles. You had behavior patterns based on feeder markets. That was what we used and still do in our forecasting models. And this worked because research behavior was visible. And it allowed us to look backwards forensically, as I kept referring to in time, where we get to go back and see what happened this time last year. Is it happening the same this year? What's different about this year than last year? Where are they coming from? What are they looking for? What is their rate sensitivity, rate resistance? All of these things are in our current 4-step process that we're so familiar with, the stimulus, research, evaluation, and booking, or as we say, discovery, education, and conversion. That process is being shifted and changed. Because now we have an intent where an LLM, long language model, the ChatGPTs, the Claudes, the Perplexities, the DeepSyncs, the Grooks, the Geminis, the Copilots, okay, circumnavigate all of this. Because instead of dozens of micro moments, websites visited and so forth, we increasingly get a 3-step process that we're not immediately involved in. Intent, which is solely from the user, or recommendation, which is from the LLM or the agentics or agents that are running it, platforms that are assisting with this. And a decision is derived from that. So all of these breadcrumbs and footpaths of everything else that's around us isn't in this scenario. We're out of that loop. The only way we get in that loop of intent, recommendation, and decision is being relevant to what the intent is about, which really befuddles our forecast capabilities. In the current context, and this is where our other shows we're going to talk a little bit more about how can we define intent with the data that we do have, because the data is still getting used that's out there. Our data, associated data, websites that we know have data about us and our destination, what have you. So there is numbers to use. But instead of using them to get to that moment of ZMOT that we can be there at that last minute where hopefully we can squeeze in and get the conversion to ourselves, we have to now invert the process to consider how can we be in the earliest stage of intent? How can we be valuable to the unknown user entity of intent that they have? And how discernible is it and how trackable is it in our AI world environment that we have now? There's limiting tools. There is some changes now. Google just made changes to identifying better generative links to websites. They have a different URL parameter that shows them, not everything. Google still hides theirs, but we get to see outside sourcing coming through. So we get to see some relative aspects of what generative is driving to us. Not clear on what drove it from the generative, just that it came from the generative. Excuse me. But at least we can identify channel value of volume at this moment better than we had done before. And there's other ways to improve this. Like I said, we'll talk about that in a future show related to this topic as we move forward, because I believe this is a fundamental behavioral shift in how we have to identify and work with things. We see persistently in discussion groups, brand discussions. I talk with clients about this. I'm in board discussions as to perspectives and so forth. And the first thing that comes out is the booking windows have shrunk, continue to shrink. Forecasting is getting muddled because there's a lack of identity, like I said, from the historical breadcrumbs that we have had over time of visitations and traffic and historicals and behavior performances and so forth. that we don't have with whatever generative is providing us. Generative basically pops on the scene. Picture it like Star Wars or Star Trek, where they come out of warp, ship's there. That's what happens with it. Sorry, I'm still a geek at heart. So what can we do from a forecasting perspective? Before we get to forecasting, let's talk about marketing. What can we do from a marketing perspective? The contrived answer, the smug answer, is to say invert our strategy. Not completely accurate, because we still have a very ZMOT-driven world right now, and it's a larger portion than the generative is, maybe a 2-to-1 ratio at this point. Generative is growing, and there's more value propositions. People become more familiar, more comfortable with which tools they like to work with and so forth. And it is fun to see people's preferences shift and change over time from what they first started using and the familiarity and the comfort zone that ChatGPT may have had for them. And all of a sudden they're Gemini users now, or they've gone full Claude, because they relate to and have a need for the results that come from different platforms that truly do come from different source values as to how they answer and collaborate with the user. And people have preferences. With that comes preferential ways of doing marketing. Everybody has their way of approaching their travel interest. Sometimes they're fixated on the destination. Sometimes they're more fixated on what it is, event that they want to do, in the sense of I want to have a family adventure, or I want to have a soft adventure, or I want to have an environmental adventure, culinary adventure, categorically those things that are out there. And from that, they begin to discover what options seem most related to their interest. Again, intent. Others business-driven, others group-driven, Smurf-driven, variables as to short-term, long-term, how far out they research. One thing that's still staying relatively tethered in the world of ZMOT and also being in the LLM or agentic world is future long-term destination planning. There seems to be a shared usage between what first gets discovered by LLM engagement and then how it's defined into a transaction, more in a ZMOT funnel, as much as the inverse happens. A ZMOT funnel will go over and bring them to a point, and then LLMs will help them expand the choices they've discovered through ZMOT discovery collectively and collaboratively into their LLM model to create contrast and opinion in comparisons to. So how it gets used, when it gets used, and how much of it gets used are the three variables that are influencing our ability to market to people that are using them. So with that, what can you do? Looking at inverting your strategy for LLMs and your agentic use and your generative use means going back to that, what makes you special. Why did your hotel get built? Where it is at and for what? That core concept of why you have brick and mortar where you are. Was it built to accommodate roadside travelers? Was it built to accommodate destination travelers? Was it built to accommodate conference travelers, convention travelers, business travelers, airport travelers, resort travelers, beach travelers, mountain travelers? What was the concept of why you are where you are offering what you're offering? And why is it that you have the amenities that you have for where you are and what you're for? Going to the concept of what you are is in a way defining what people's intended interest in you will be, because what you are is what they will discover if you make it available to them. As odd as it may sound, no, not as odd as it may have been, but as odd as it may sound, SEO is the key to your marketing strategy. Without solid organic content specific to the value proposition of your business, you're chasing after people that don't find what they find should you have made them come look. You could spend all the money in the world to try to get in front of them, but if they don't see what they want, because what you did was garner their interest and their curiosity, but you made it sound like you had what it is that would be valid for their interest, only to find out when they come to your website that it's not there, you've just wasted your money. So intent is about honesty and truth. It's called EAT, authenticity and trust. The value of what you are and making sure that it is well represented in your content, in your advertisement for the ZMOT side, And for your SEM discovery and your schema, your definitions of what you have and what you are, okay, means that you can be best showing up when people are first looking about what it is that you represent in the way of their intent, their interest. Okay. Um, People are becoming faster, better at understanding how to negotiate the communication with their model of choice, their LLM of choice, whether it's Gemini, whether it's Copilot, whether it's ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, whatever. They understand how the model interacts with them. I've watched non-tech people that have 6-year-old phones become, I wouldn't say addicted, but persistent in their use of using ChatGPT. They like the fact that they can just simply now talk to their phone to give them an answer to something, as randomly as their question is, rather than as typing as they have to be. But they have to construct a question correctly. Now they can simply ramble the question, and then if it didn't get understood clearly or if an answer came back that was not related to the question, they can clarify it by talking to it again. This learning education process that people are having behaviorally is changing, as I said, the usages of generative discovery. Our ability to be accurate with our information about all the things that we are, not the things that we try to push that we are, the amazing balcony view room, which really is nothing more than looking interior to a courtyard area, but you want to make it sound as sexy as possible. That is different than somebody adamantly looking for a view of the sunset. So you have to understand those nuances of your hotels. For every hotel I've ever run, there was rooms that I thought were special rooms, whether it was their configuration, whether it was their location, whether it was their view. But there was always these rooms that I think had unique value to them. Now is the time to take those kind of things, those little inside things, and describe them well. Describe the fact that at this time of year, this room has an absolutely stunning sunset view, or view of the mountains, or view of the lake, or whatever that view might be. Or this room, the unique layout of it compared to all the other rooms allows a wonderful additional space that if you're traveling with a baby or an infant, there's a cradle area that you can have that is quiet enough in comparison to having them in the room with you. Little nuances like that create value propositions. That kind of content, that kind of descriptive content, and I'm not trying to create complexities by saying now you can only sell room 226, kind of thing. No, but the fact that you have that gets you into the early conversations. Like, well, they have this cool room that features some value to breastfeeding your baby. Okay. It means that you have a second chance at convincing them that you should be under early consideration. Those nuances of content are critically important to your adaptive use of going to the front of the line in the early generative usage while you're still doing your ZMOT marketing and traffic for everyone to get to the end of the line, which is at the moment of transaction. Okay, so it precludes, when you go to the early intent, you're not worried about booking window. You're not worried about all of the constructive breadcrumbs that require you to know when to interject your messaging into and traditional linear marketing like we do currently. What you're really doing is you're going to let them define what they find in value to you based on their intent by being accurate with your data, but detailed about values that you have. And from that, they can discover more. If they're rate sensitive and you're just not a good rate for them, it still takes you out of the run. If you don't have elevated rooms and they wanted elevated rooms, it takes you out of the run. All the other intended stuff that isn't defined by the LLM model quite yet still can knock you out of the conversation. But here's the fun part with LLMs. Once they found the data that's most applicable, they're going to try to see if that data is still usable in the next query conversation. As the user refines what they're doing, they're going to continue to use what they learned from the first one into the second one. If you're in the first content, it's going to evaluate whether you can stay in the second content. And if it gets taken out, users are beginning to know they can go back and say, well, how, you mentioned that hotel, but why'd you take it out? And they'll come back and say, because you wanted elevated rooms and it doesn't have any elevated rooms. Okay. But you're in the conversation because you go from being unknown to being known in the early intent stages. In ZMOT, you go from not being discovered to become aware, becoming to valued, and then you come to the point, can you validate a decision of conversion? So it's the two ends of the line that you're discussing and working for. The reduction of friction of the users of being able to go from inspiration planning to booking with LLMs is profound. What's holding them back, or what I think is still being hesitant about, is they like the fact that early information has been presented to them, closer to the decision information is presented to them up front. But the FOMO factor, the fear of missing out, did I ask the right question? Did I include everything that's important to me? Is there anything else in the area that might be better fit to just, I don't know what I don't know? How do I ask, is there something about these things that I want to do? Is there a better location in that area that might provide more value or more experience or more reward for doing that? And again, people are learning how to use their interactions with their long language models to get better at that. Again, you need to make sure you have very defined, very clear, very micro pointed content pieces to address things like this room, I have rooms that give nice little area for the baby, okay? Or a wet bar. Or I have a big tub that you can float in or have the kids play in, or all these variations of referring to value propositions that are within your hotel. Large halls, well-lit halls, bright rooms, views of the city, most of the hotel's view of the city, at no extra value cost compared to alternate view rooms and so forth. Whatever these nuances are need to be put into your content, because this is the way that the models are finding you. Remember, we've already had our discussions about how search engines have the bots that go and read everything, categorize everything, authenticate everything. Long language models are looking for specific targeted data points. If they find it, they use it. Again, with the authenticity and value proposition. And also sometimes they make stuff up, which is again why people want to reaffirm what they're getting from long language models, that even though the long language was brought them right to the doorstep of a hotel that, according to everything they were asked, should be the hotel that the user wants, the user's still going to, most likely, unless they've gotten high confidence and they just want to move forward, they're going to look in their own and say, okay, well, now it's brought me to that. Let me go look, see what this hotel's all about. And who's competing with it, and what other things are right in the immediate area? Is this really the hotel, or is it just the one that seems to have convinced my long language model that it's the choice to make? I mean, they're going to do their own research. This is when your ZMOT modeling marketing comes into place. Now, I told you we're going to talk about forecasting. We're going to just touch on it on this show. We'll refer to more of it in the next show or the show after, because there's a couple of steps process to this conversation I think we need to have. But the forecasting model is a lot about exposure and value based on intent and interest. Behaviorally, we have lots of data to know when people are beginning to engage. If you look at the multi-channel world that we're in, we've always talked about social being an early instigation of inception of interest, of being out there talking and dealing with content associated with things and seeing that engagement build from organic engagement to paid relationship to amplify the audience, to a transitional paid program on alternate channels, to an actual targeted program closer to the booking window. This progressive shift in marketing, multi-channel, okay, as things go on, trying to shift into another channel to create better collaboration and so forth, that whole marketing model we've always referred to in that workflow is still very vibrant and very present. The intent marketing is very similar to that. All you're doing is getting the early engagement capabilities, but then you have to be in that world of affirmation, reaffirmation, FOMO, and everything else for them to get validated as to why you're still the best selective choice. So you do need to forecast by volume how many people are interacting with you. Now, this comes from how the queries run, what words are used in the queries, how are the variations of the queries created that are most likely to be used that would be most valuable to you. These are things you can actually build and do. And from those queries, determine what content needs to be added to yours so that you show up well for those query types when certain words are used. We had a wonderful conversation a few shows back, 3 shows back actually, talking about keyword volume as a metric measurement of volume of voice. That kind of mentality of mathematics still comes into play. How many people collectively are using these terms and types in context to search phrasings that are being done with long language models? Okay, they're the prompts. And from that popularity, you can say on general terms, these words, Google-wise, is this much volume. And if that's the case, then if we're getting this much reaction to these prompts that we're seeing tracking now, then we know that we have this relative value of voice compared to what the total volume related to the usage of those terms might be in the LLM world. We're just implying a metric. It's still napkin math, but at least it's some sort of vague parameter around the volume of people you're dealing with. That same mentality for forecasting has to come into play. You have to look at who am I talking to and how many of them are there? And is it valuable for me to keep chasing like that? We may find that there may be smaller audiences with higher densities, kind of like the Facebook models, where you weren't going off of the grandiose size of a model or of an audience as you were looking at the well-targeting of a small audience with high yieldability. Same too with long language models. Mathematically, a smaller interest group that's very specific in their interest of has a higher yield value than a large group that has disseminated interest or diluted interest or generalized interest. Because we're dealing with the intent world, you got to play both to know which has a value proposition. And time is a factor. When do people start doing these kinds of discoveries compared to when the actual interest category of time is relevant? We now know that people are beginning to realize that long language models can get them to a very fast decision, very shorter window. Hence, we see shorter booking windows because people don't have to spend a long time going through the typical process of a ZMOT transaction to get to where they are coming to your hotel. Sometimes it could be within a very short couple of days or same day that they're like, oh, I'm going to go, yeah, okay, oh, I never got my hotel yet. Hey, Copilot, what's a great hotel that's near the airport that I can get a shuttle from the airport, blah, 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 or something that's down close to downtown by the office I got to go for the meeting for. And it'll come up with it. That can happen in the day of the transaction. You can be that part of the discussion and the discovery because of that. You may have missed the whole boat early to that. They may have booked somebody else or whatever, and you can still capture them if you qualify as a better variation to that by them making a last minute discovery. So the game isn't over until the day passes. Anyways, I've made my earlier points of what I wanted to about this in the sense that it's a thought-provoking concept to say that we're migrating from a ZMOT funnel process to an intent-based marketing program. This also includes forecasting, which again, as I said, we'll talk about in the next couple of weeks. But it's a thought processes now you can adopt from your marketing strategy and begin to think of ways that you can begin to be early with this. Because if you're early with this, you get the lion's share. Because if you're into this, the brands that adapt first will likely see an outsized share of AI-mediated bookings, especially in leisure hospitality, okay? Because inspiration and trip planning are increasingly delegated to LLMs. That whole tell me what I need to know or tell me what I don't know conversation with the long language models is exactly leisure hospitality's bread and butter. So the earlier you start this idea, the earlier you consider this idea, the earlier you begin to build your microgranular concept of content and your ability to show aspects that would be intent related, the better chance you have of getting the lion's share to your market before others start to just trying to move in on traditional static marketing ideas. So with that, thank you so much for joining us live. If you're watching us on the TV channel, 209 countries, thank you as always for your patronage and watching. If you're watching us on the simulcast of Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, thank you for catching us on all of our associated associations that run us on their pages and their channels, as well as corporate relationships and so forth. None of this is sponsored. You know that this has all been, we've been doing this for 12 years, every week, no matter where in the world we are, including being here in the Netherlands. Thank you for joining us on that. If you want to catch up on more follow-up to this or rewatch the show in components and pieces, you can catch us on hospitalitychannel.tv. It is our I Love Lucy rerun show. All of our shows for all the years are there. You look up by data broadcast, hosts, or topic, and they're there. There's an on-demand feature as well as a linear feature where all the shows get put onto. Or you can catch us on a recap on 11:30 a.m. Wednesday mornings for London, EU. Even though I hear them at the EU, we're broadcasting on US time, 11:30 a.m. So 11:30 a.m. Wednesday, London time for our EU and Mideast friends, and then 11:30 a.m. Wednesday morning for Sydney time for our APAC and Australian friends and Asian friends. You can catch both that, and then of course the new show playback on Hospitality Radio, which is broadcast in 39 countries. So the show is retranslated in 11 languages, and the radio station is, like I said, in 39 countries. So you can catch the radio station, very linear. Lots of other broadcasting contents on there as well from excellent providers that are also on the topic of hospitality. So with that, my name is Lauren Gray. Oh, if you have any comments, comments, questions, feedback, please reach me at lauren@hospitalitydigitalmarketing.com, or you can reach out at hdm.news/talkback. There's an audio function. You can go there and answer your question, or just give me your comeback and feedback. So with that, now we can get to the, hey, this is Lauren Gray. I thank you for the privilege of your time and look forward to talking to you all next week.